I'm Tom Strong, President, CEO, founder of this organization. Been involved with this for a long time. Also did construction for a long time. Had a lot of experience in the building and civil side. And I'm tasked with trying to host a conversation amongst this group. And thank you so much for coming. And today we're talking about heavy civil and public projects and the impact of technology. And I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. Maybe starting right here.
Oh, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Deeth. I'm a manager at Infrastructure Ontario. I'm part of our commercial advisory team. We provide in-house advice and solutions to government. You probably saw my colleague, Anthony Mastroianni, present earlier on digital twins, and that's what's been keeping me busy these past few months, is working on a strategy to implement digital twins in Ontario to better build the $180 billion of infrastructure over the next decade.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Walter. I'm with AECOM Canada, and I'm the digital consulting lead for AECOM Canada. But my background is in heavy civil and public projects, leading our alternative delivery group within AECOM on big P3 projects within the region here. So I'm familiar with kind of that type of project, but we've taken our learned lessons from those experiences and now standing up digital consulting advisory for clients like IO.
Hi everyone, my name is Steve Tremblay. I'm the Director of BIM and Integrated Design Process Deployment in SQI, Société, québécoise des infrastructures. So I'm coming from Quebec, this little island, French island. So you'll have to excuse me for my English level. Hope I'm doing well. So on a daily basis, I'm the BIM and IDP director at the SQI, and I'm also in charge of the coordination committee of one huge initiative going on in Quebec, which is called Government BIM Roadmap Deployment. So this is the first government entities in Canada to mandate the deployment of BIM in all public projects across during the 5 following years. So I'm working with a huge team to make it happen. We have 6 great public owner that are involved in the BIM roadmap. So that's a chance for me to speak about that today.
And hi, my name's Dan Meller. I'm an engineering manager for PCL down in Arizona with our infrastructure group, which is based in Arizona. We do take care of our U.S. infrastructure across the country from California all the way out to Florida, primarily focused on water infrastructure. It's probably 90% or more of our work, with the balance being a little bit of movable bridges and rail down in the southeast United States. I've been in PCL 22 years. I've seen a lot of changes through VDC and BIM and technology through PCL in that time. I've had 30 years in the infrastructure business. And part of my role as the engineering manager is I have a group that's based in Arizona with a few people out on job sites. We manage a lot of the technical construction engineering for the projects, but it also includes all the BIM and VDC. I got a large group that does all of our VDC for all of our projects, for all about $1.5 billion a year of work in place. And we produce those models. In water, you seldom get a model from an engineer. And if you do, it's kind of garbage. So we do create those models from scratch, and we will do that for our subs because we do got limited subs. So it's, and I guess one more thing, we're also we've been the clearinghouse for new, really construction technologies for our group. We will vet them out, make sure they're appropriate for our teams out in the field, and then we implement them out in the field.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the introductions and just rules of engagement. This pretty small room, and I think we're all comfortable shouting out questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand or just ask it if you find an opportunity. We have a great panel, obviously a couple government agencies, a major design entity, a construction entity. So we're hoping to have a conversation to kind of explore the impact of technology on heavy civil specifically, but also broadly buildings and procurement. So I guess my first question is, in your careers, what are the major trends that you've seen, and how has that impacted your work? And maybe I'll start with Dan. We'll work our way back this
All
way
right.
now.
So this is going to come from a vantage point of being a infrastructure builder. Started out hands-on as a field engineer, and I'd say, started 30 years ago, and I was one of 6 field engineers on what would be about $1 billion project in today's market. And I had to share a computer with all 6 of those field engineers. And they weren't even sure we needed a computer, because why would you? The only thing you needed was email. Why would a field engineer need email? We had our HP calculators, field book, and a theodolite, and that was all. That was our technology. I've seen it grown from there relatively quickly. A lot of infrastructure, it looks like we're kind of slow at taking up the technology. We were actually introduced BIM to PCL 20 years ago. I can remember our then CEO, Ross Greaves, coming in and seeing it. We were modeling all of our process piping and on our plants using BIM. Back then, it was more glorified 3D modeling and coordination drawings. And I remember the surprise that he was having pushback from buildings to start implementing BIM up here in Canada and across the U.S. And here, a bunch of cowboys in Arizona on a treatment plant were doing it, and that was the start. The challenge is being infrastructure, we're a small market compared to commercial buildings. So all of the software technology, all the developers and all the technologies being pushed is really being geared towards a big pile of money, which is commercial buildings. Infrastructure is kind of on the side. You may get some technology, they'll look and try to shoehorn in the technology that's really meant for buildings, try to get to work for infrastructure. But it's a fundamentally different type of construction, and most of the time it's an ill fit. And we found if it's an ill fit, we don't even try putting on a shoe. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing now is in the last really about 5 years is the trends. We're starting to see companies come in and really specifically target infrastructure needs and technology as self-performing contractors and getting applications that actually fit perfectly for what our world is.
What percentage of your work do you execute without producing a 3D model first?
Well, let me start by saying we self-perform anywhere from 70 to 100% of the work, depending on the project type and location. We will model all of the structures and we will model all of the piping. Unless it's a very small, easy job, special project job, we will model all of the work. The level of detail we get to isn't quite as fine as you would have in a building. Mm-hmm. We're only interested in being, one, we don't build buildings, we build structures. And the structures are not, if you strip this hotel down to just the bare bones of concrete and MEP, that's what we're building. So we're only focused on the things that we need to get coordinated in place. So we're focusing on the structure, the process equipment, the process piping, which can be up to 10 feet in diameter in some cases, and the major MEP, the major ventilation and ductwork. The rest of it, honestly, is so small in comparison to what the structures are, we really don't worry about them too much.
So Steve, same question. In your career, SQI is doing a lot of maturity work, helping the industry to evolve. You're seeing trends in the market. You've obviously identified the use of BIM as a major value creation initiative for the industry, and Quebec government, Quebec Hydro, and a lot of entities have invested money to help the industry go through that adoption curve and get better. So what trends are you seeing, and what is SQI doing to help with market maturity in Quebec?
Yeah, we do a lot, I think. We lead the building transformation right now, the industry transformation. I saw, I'm working in the BIM deployment since now about 20 years. And for the SQI, I'm there since 14 years now, pushing on BIM adoption. Now we have a governmental BIM roadmap. That's a huge trend. That's a huge push to the industry. We are leading that. I saw across the years, at the beginning, we used the BIM to make the fundamentals of the BIM. We used 3D to have better coordination. What we see in the past year, we can now build on that. We can now turn on data management. We can now use BIM larger to respond to many things we have to manage in a project development. So this is what I see the maturity is increasing. Now we can build on this foundation. And what is important on our side, yes, that's correct to focus on technologies, on data. What we have may be important on our side, it's the human side. It's the collaboration, working with humans before technologies, and making sure on the Quebec project we have trust in the stakeholder and collaboration. Once you have collaboration and trust across the project teams, then you can focus on technology. This is what I think is the most important and the most present in Quebec right now.
So Jeff, AECOM, massive engineering firm, probably 82 countries, 80,000 employees, something like that. Dan says that your models are terrible.
Yeah, I heard that.
No,
That's why we're at the table here.
Maybe you can talk about what you guys are doing. I mean, I'm sure with a big company, there's different levels of maturity, and what are you guys doing? Like, what are you seeing as trends in infrastructure in particular? Where do you think the standard of care lies with producing models for contractors to use? I'm kind of curious on your perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely respect that perspective, and I think it's been traditionally kind of a challenge in terms of adoption is the start point, for sure, which, in life cycle kind of thinking, like that's an important point. But I will say, because related to kind of that BIM adoption from that start point, certainly what I'm seeing is that there are different factors now influencing technology adoption, in particular BIM adoption as well. It's not just about the technology, it's not just about the solution. And I'm glad that you brought up the human factor as a designer. I definitely love to hear that for sure. But, technology is almost being driven by either outcomes now. So, I mean, we're all familiar now with an evolving ISO 19650 landscape in terms of compliance with information related to our deliverables. We're seeing the need for collaboration. We're seeing the need to connect with other information to produce other outcomes that are just outside the realm of BIM in a sense. So it's outcome driven more, so real problems in the market, use cases driven sense. But it's also approach now is influencing, the start of any type of infrastructure project now, and many different kind of contract kind of frameworks now, particularly in alternative delivery. The approach that you're taking is also influencing technology adoption. So right from the very beginning of a project, for example, in a progressive design build, you have to track information, you have to track progress in a different way. So that approach to projects is influencing kind of adoption in general. And I can say with clarity for sure, we're definitely getting a lot of push from the construction side in terms of making models more usable, more information laid in, metadata, connected to different processes, schedule, assets, etc. So we're definitely seeing requirements coming through from a design perspective to drive kind of better BIM authoring production. So these are influences outside of kind of the technology.
Yeah, my perspective on it always is that, the objective of all the documentation is to help the construction. Ultimately, we're going to actualize a wastewater treatment plant or a bridge. So everyone should be working backwards from the labor on the job site, saying what will make those people as efficient as possible. How should we create our information to give them the best instructions so that we create the highest level of efficiency? And, you know, the industry's always kind of operated a little bit different from that. It's like architect produces or engineer produces a set of drawings, kind of defines the work, and then there's a lump sum tendering process, and there's a major disconnect.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real opportunity in the kind of forward trend with contracts generally is how are we going to collaborate better and how can we think differently?
Yeah.
Um,
And that's influences approaches even from a design perspective. I mean, design for manufacturing and is really kind of a new kind of design approach that really defines kind of that connection to kind of that life cycle thinking. So
Yeah.
it's really playing out in those ways now.
So Emily, Infrastructure Ontario, what are you guys doing? Are you doing anything at all like SQI? I mean, they've been very aggressive in the Quebec market with introducing standards and helping with market maturity. Where are you at in that?
I think we're a little behind, honestly, from Steve's kudos. But we're trying really with the work we're doing now is to move us along and mature more fully. I think we've adopted as a procurement agency a collaborative approach to procurement, working more with industry to figure out how to better plan in advance rather than be at the get-go be like, okay, we have $8 billion to build a highway somewhere. It's working with our partners to establish how we can use different technology from the start.
The Ontario, I mean, I'm just on the outsider looking in here on, well, I guess insider as well, but looking at the LRTs and the struggles that have been with, staying on schedule and staying on budget and whatnot. It seems like the root cause of that is just the lumpiness of the projects. I mean, they're so massive. They all came online at the same time. And there wasn't, in my opinion, not a lot of, no one had real foresight on how much the industry could absorb in the way of like skilled labor or engineering capability or design capability or general project management. And as we kind of move forward, I think that maybe the industries we're chatting has more capacity now because we've gone through and hired more people and created more skills and maybe more new companies formed. But is there any kind of systemized approach now to looking at industry's capacity and the pace at which work can be put on the street and how much we can actually absorb and effectively manage? Like, curious.
I think as part of our strategy for digital twin, that's something we're looking at. Like we see as using these new tools that are available to us to do better scenario planning.
Yeah.
So we can plan when our materials are coming in and we can match our resources up to that and better foresee and mitigate our risk.
Yeah.
For that. It's like the fiasco of Eglinton line it's a little embarrassing to be up here talking to that, but I think we can take those lessons learned from that and do better in our big projects such as the Ontario line.
Yeah. Well, every project has its challenges, right? And it's, I don't know, Dan, from your perspective, working down in the States, do you see any differences with tendering and public agencies putting work on the street, kind of looking at what is the process for them to get the market interested in bidding on work? Or is it more, or do you see more of a negotiated approach now because the market's so busy?
Yes.
What trends do you see there?
On the water side, it's much, especially on the larger capital projects, it's a negotiated approach either as a design build to let out projects do a performance-based procurement based on your design build or CMR risk. And they do stay, the owners and the municipalities, our owners are cities and counties, for the water agencies are our clients, and they stay pretty well in tuned to the community. It's a very small community that builds these plants. And they stay involved with the different agencies, different American Water Association agencies around the country. And so they do got an ear to the ground for what capacity is, what other projects are going out. We don't see it as big of a disconnect. When I was seeing, how far off the schedules shift in the earlier presentation this morning, we don't see that on the water. I know that's from the original conception, from the owner's point of view, not the contractors, but they do tend to hold pretty close to their, if anything, we kind of beat their schedules. Mm-hmm. They have learned to add a
Tighten
buffer
it up.
to them.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest change was going to CMRISC or design build. When it's hard bid, there's still plenty of competition for it. The problem was it was whoever forgot the most on a bid day got the job, and that's not who you want to build your job. So then the projects would suffer, and that's when they would be late. It's because you have a contractor that was low, contractually you got to use them, but they don't have the skill set or resources to really complete the job on time, or even complete the job period. And that's what's driven the industry down the states to go to that alternative procurement.
So the whole industry is experiencing a skilled labor shortage. Are you experiencing the same thing in your market?
Yeah.
Are you using any platforms or any kind of like technology to address that, or is it just sort of coordinating as much as you can so you ultimately can?
Yeah, I mean, part of the efforts of our BIM is one to make sure that minimizing, we're trying to get everything on site right on time and eliminating rework. There's not enough labor to do the work once. We definitely have enough labor to do it twice or three times over. But really the biggest thing we're striving to do is take as much of that work on site and shift it off site and really go through and have everything as much as we can prefabricated before it gets to site, modularize it. So you're eliminating the amount of skill that you do need on site to get the plants built. We've done, PCL has a long history of doing that up in the tar sands, up in the oil industry with super modules that they bring up there and assemble. Recently have converted that into doing MEP work in hospitals. And we've been doing that not to that extent on plants. That's where we want to go next. But we have been using our models that my team produce really are fabrication models. They're actually models that we send out to pipe fabricators. They build that pipe many states away from where the projects are and ship it. So it's just assembled on site. And same with the actual process equipment. That's all coordinated, all fabricated offsite. And when it comes in, it's really just it's almost a skid that you bring in. So really minimize what you can.
Are your clients asking for any kind of digital project delivery requirements, like a digital turnover of any sort? Are you seing that start to emerge as a requirement?
Very, very few. Right now, and we've been doing this. I've been in the industry for 30 years. We have our first project ever asking for it, which is the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, SFPUC. And this is one of their first projects where they're asking for it. And that's it. So there's very few really asking for it. There's a lot of talk about it in all the conferences, but we don't really actually see it.
Just sort of emerging. Steve, in your market, are you starting to see like a Manitoba Hydro, but also Quebec Hydro had requirements for CATIA deliverables years ago, and I don't know if they've continued on with that initiative. And does SQI have any kind of like digital twin or digital delivery requirements?
That's a journey where we are in, so that's sure. What we have right now in the new project that we're launching, we have a list of requirements for the asset management. So this is new for us. We had to, I would say, surprisingly, the project management team is a different universe across SQI than the asset management team. We are getting those people speak together and get together to better know what we have to receive at the end. So this is coming in our project, and across the BIM government roadmap, we are talking, as you said, with Hydro, with Société d'habitation du Québec, which is a social housing department, City of Montreal, City of Quebec, and we are getting together to have the same requirement, or I would say requirements that are replicable and for the project team that are working with us or with the Ministry of Transportation or Hydro. They can say what each other we are looking for, and this is common across the owner, public owner. So this is what we are working on.
So do you see that emerging as a requirement on future public projects, having a spec with a specific deliverable by project type?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you're working across multiple markets, right? Are you seeing that emerge as a requirement?
Yeah, definitely. Even in the market here, in big public transit, transit agency, ISO 19650 requirements, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
Expectations for level of information that are new LOIs on projects, LOD, deeper kind of levels of development. I wouldn't say it's fully the way there, but there's definitely some framework emerging. You know, in the market here, even ISO 19650, which in other parts of the world is much more formalized, much more audited, much more mature. It's still a kind of emerging state here, but definitely we're starting to see that trickle down into requirements, contractual requirements in terms of deliverables.
Do you see the ISO 19650 requirements creating value, or is it just another hurdle? Like, do you see
It's absolute value.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really a driver of collaboration. I think that was the intent of it from the very beginning. So, how we manage sharing of information is a really critical component of ISO 19650. How obviously the stakeholders who's engaged, but also how that's done too. So not only sharing information at the right time, but you actually know what you're looking at too. So there's enough kind of enriched context to that sharing of information in that process that supports collaboration and downstream kind of better decision making. And I think that falls into the kind of category of a lean kind of construction, lean kind of processes, agile, responding to project. All those elements fit into kind of the outcomes of 19650, I think.
And Emily, you're on the receiving end of a lot of these digital deliveries, right, for this digital twin initiative. Are there standards emerging that you're starting to specify as part of IO projects? Is that on the horizon?
That is part of our role. Like we're not technically part of government. We are government adjacent as an agency. I think we do have a role in driving stakeholder adoption of different standards. And part of that is also standardization, getting people to share different data points with us at a certain level and quality, a certain time base, so we can meet our goals of building 100,000 houses, or no, 1.5 million houses by 2031, I think it is, while dealing with like a labor shortage of like an estimated 100,000 people. So I think we can play a role in driving that with our partners through incorporating it into our procurements. Like I'm hearing what Steve does and I want to connect with him, but like I know we've talked to like the Office of Projects in Victoria, Australia, and what they're doing is if for any priority project over like $20 million, you have to meet certain standards and you have to make certain like technology commitments essentially to even be considered.
Interesting.
On the digital twin note, I will say that I'm a part of a subcommittee for the National Institute for Building Science, and there is a committee looking at BIM to digital twin integration. So standardization of where we start from a BIM perspective, leading to those digital twin outcomes. So you can see from a standardization and that life cycle concept is starting to emerge now.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think of, other than Steve, but like in Canada, like without BIM mandates, we're not on the same playing field as a lot of our like neighboring jurisdictions, and then we lose, like there's limited resources to use and we want to attract people to do work here. So I think part of that might be driving that.
So Dan, at PCL, are you introducing other technologies? I mean, we talked about sort of the management of information, the coordination piece. What are you introducing on the job sites that might be different, that might collect information or enhance safety or do some automated reporting? Or
The technology we use on the jobs are, well, one of our bread and butters is laser scanning. We've been doing BIM for, as I said, almost for decades in our infrastructure group. But the advent of laser scanning, because before laser scanning, the BIM was a very fancy version of the drawings, may or may not be more accurate in terms of relationships to other things. We're often building plant works inside, more often not in existing plants. Where if facilities are chock full of piping and equipment and conduit and just leftovers from sometimes century of previous work. The laser scan allowed us to get an as-built, point cloud of that, pull that into the model to where we're now modeling the new piping, new equipment, new features into that existing element. And that's been a real game changer for just the accuracy of the work going in and eliminating, and I'm not kidding, that in my first start of my career out of school, you would have truckloads of pipe that was just sent for scrap.
Yeah.
Stuff you paid $10 a pound for, you're selling for 10 cents a pound at the end of the job. We've eliminated that by, making it so that, material shows up correct, or at minimum correct enough to be field adjusted and not completely scrapped. So that's been a big, huge benefit of technology in the field. The drones are another one. That was a very natural technology to fit in the civil market. The ability to replace really a surveyor with a drone when you're doing topographic surveying. It's not even a question of whether what you should implement on a job site. Just probably a 20-fold savings in cost alone, and probably a 10-fold better survey on top of that. So drones are used on every project. If we got dirt that we're moving around on a project, we're going to be using drones to quantify what we're going to be moving before, during the estimating stages, and during the process to see how much we got, make sure we don't haul off too much dirt, if we got to keep some on site, or make sure our balance of fill is correct. So drones have been a key part of it, as well as our robotic total stations. Pairing that with, we try to keep the surveyors off the projects. We feel like we do a better job surveying the sites on our own. We know what we're laying out, what we're building better than a third-party surveyor. So having a robotic total station that makes it relatively a simple task for a young field engineer just out of school to really produce a quality layout is a key to our quality, not only our quality control, but our efficiency at building. On safety, there's the reporting part of safety, which technology comes into, but the biggest bit I've seen just directly to our guys, their direct personal safety in the field, is a lot of result of what we saw earlier with Hilti and their tools. And the cordless tools, the advent of really being able to have large cordless tools, has drastically cleaned up the job site. Not having cables laying around. Trips and falls are one of our biggest safety concerns, followed only by eye injuries, dust in the eyes. And the same thing with the drills that, self-capture the dust from overhead. Those type of tool technologies and that have really just been coming out in the last, I would say, less than 5 years, almost just since COVID, that we've seen tools really being adaptive with safety in mind for construction. That's had a big benefit on our safety program.
Steve, in Quebec, do you see the same sorts of technologies being deployed on projects, or the public entity, maybe you're not using these tools directly, but maybe you're requiring some of these things?
Not directly, but Dan was talking about drones. I know that in the transportation ministry, they use drone and photogrammetry to assess the life cycle of an infrastructure and to see year after year what's the deformation, what's the going on with the bridge or the infrastructure they have to manage. So that's a great usage, I think, of a drone and technology too, because we speak a lot about the construction period, but there's also the asset management and life cycle that is technology can bring us benefits.
Jeff, you must be using drones to collect digital train models at the beginning of the projects to optimize your cut and fill on these big civil projects, or what are you guys doing on your end?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we've got a full drone team, pilots, etc. Definitely those are, definitely information sources that are valuable to kind of providing context in kind of a designer feedback loop along the way. And I think, yeah, that's representative of kind of like overall kind of technology shifts in the design side of things. It's certainly about kind of feedback loop, right? And so whether it's information collected from the field, if it's embodied carbon kind of life cycle information connected to your BIM models, it's informing kind of design kind of process along the way. And I guess that's a bit of a digital twin kind of approach is as designers, and particularly early on, we definitely focus a lot of what's happening in the 0 to 30% kind of design phase. And the more information that you're kind of like building into that context of that initial scenario planning and stuff like that, the better results kind of downstream that you have. But that does mean that there's a lot of information sources that are informing context. And, certainly the concept of integrated kind of data environments and being able to bring all those kind of together and kind of centralize kind of environments is a critical component of that feedback loop. So definitely one trend we're seeing is accelerators for kind of connecting information. So plugging in, and whether it's back end or kind of program to some degree, but in tightening up the loop of kind of data flow. So whether it's back end API kind of microprocessing, but just shortening up the kind of feedback loop is a real big focus right now.
Yeah, so in a design pursuit scenario, like a big P3 project, you would incur a lot of costs, as would general contractors, in collecting information on the existing site conditions, maybe utility information, and all the bidders at that stage are collecting that information and incurring those costs, which seems to be a source of inefficiency if everybody's doing the same thing in the collection part. And I'm wondering, like IO, when you put work on the street, would it be more efficient to take more of a lead role in capturing the digital train model or validation of underground utilities, and then when you release that work to the bidders, they're all working off the same initial information, and that also is maybe tied to just general better coordination with the underground utility companies to force them to provide better as-builts and maintain databases. Like, is there R&D work underway? Or
yeah, so it's like this is something we're really considering for digital twin is looking at potential of an underground utility asset network to understand, because we really think that is upstream to all the work we do. Yeah. And if we can help who we work with work faster, get people on the ground, that's going to be better for Ontarians.
Yeah. Well, it's a massive undertaking, right? I mean, just think about inner city Toronto, the amount of buried utility lines that virtually no as-built exist on. But the data does get collected. When you hire someone to dig up the road, they daylight those systems. But there seems to be no, maybe there is now, but systemized approach to collecting that information and putting it into a single database. So is that really the core of the digital twin initiative?
I'm not confident enough to say it's the core, at the moment, but I think we're really considering that as a very strong use case.
I vote for that.
I do too. I've been 25 years waiting for that.
And you see, in the UK, with the National Underground Asset Registry,
because it's not
a lot of benefits.
It's not just the issue of not knowing where it is from a design standpoint, but that risk of where it is gets passed down to the contractors who have to absorb the risk of hitting that or designing something that is interfering with it, and then there's enormous cost to rework it and delays and et cetera. And I don't know what the story of the Eglinton line is, but I would imagine a lot of it has to do with that.
Yeah, that cost is real. I mean, we do not put together, whether it's a hard bid or a proposal or a GMP, that risk is, contracts that's all we do is manage risk. We know that risk is there, and that is you pay for it. It's in there. It's buried in those cost codes.
So supply chain has been a major issue post-COVID, I think, for everyone. Just workforce getting back up to regular productivity, and then potentially workforce not coming back because they got laid off. So there's been a huge deferment issue with all supply of all materials. And also we saw a major bump in cost of supply of commodity goods and engineered goods and manufactured goods. Are we getting on the tail end of that now, Dan? Do you see that coming down? And are you applying any kind of technology to track those costs? I mean, you must have estimating databases and other
We
things.
do. It'd be a little bit out of my wheelhouse for my group, but we do track it. Not just at our district, but we track it at a corporate level as well across all our districts. Is it behind us? I don't know. It's still present, and I don't think there's been enough trending back to say that it's behind us. The procurement times have become incredibly long to the point they are creating real delays on projects. Normal a treatment plant, a medium-sized treatment plants probably a two-year project. It's now a 3-year project just because of procurement. A large treatment plant's going to be more closer to 5 years, again because of procurement. It's simple things like getting switchgear, VFDs, any sort of significant equipment package, treatment equipment package. They're a year out, and that's a year out after. Oftentimes they get the money. It's not, they won't even start till you give them at least a significant portion, not just 10%, to get their submittals going. You got to give them a significant amount of money so they get the cash flow. But it's causing real delays, and it's causing us to actually, it's one of the reasons really allows is to push to make sure everything is CMRS or design build is we can get, the first decision you make is what equipment you're using. Get the equipment size so you can size the switchgear for it. You can size the VFDs and get those things ordered, and then start finishing design. You've had to change what normally is a 10% design kind of schematic now is actually enough that you can order some of the major equipment packages, and then you go through and you're finishing off.
That's why the 0 to 30, not just from a design perspective, but from a design build and even owner perspective, is really critical. So those initial decisions, those initial motions forward are collaborative kind of analysis there.
Well, they are, and it has to be done with, as a contractor, we can. No one works more with the equipment suppliers, vendors than the contractors. So we know what their capabilities are, what's real information from them for durations, what's just talk from them, and so we filter that through to the designer and to the owner so they can make a proper business decision on what equipment to buy. And equipment is 20, maybe 30% of the cost of a treatment plant.
So Jeff, you're in the design build scenario that those long lead items that are on the critical path are being pushed. Decisions and commitments need to be made way earlier in the process. And that's been your experience. I'm wondering from a procurement standpoint, does IO or SQI ever take risk and order equipment before work has been awarded?
What we do in the SQE to answer that issues, we had in the contractual document some items that can make the submittals have the latitude, or they have to take the risk, as Dan was saying, take the risk of the volatility of the pricing. And we had in our document some things that the tender can use this clause to adjust the price at the right time when they have to acquire or buy the equipment. So this is the kind of thing we make happen to manage the risk. Because as Dan said, the risk is added to the cost of the project. So we have to find answer to those.
So we've chatted a little bit about the skilled labor shortage, and there's at this conference there's a lot of like robots on display and whatnot. And there's, in the civil world, it's, these are like road works, and we've seen a big evolution in the type of equipment being used and what it's capable of doing, the pace at which asphalt can be put down, that sort of thing. We've seen lots of examples internationally of like, very sophisticated bridge replacements where they do them like overnight almost, do you see, Jan, robotics and automation starting to affect the way that you do work? Do you see, like I've seen some robots that you can, like gantry systems that can tie rebar, place rebar, for example, across roadways. Are you seeing those sorts of things start to emerge from your perspective? What are you seeing in the market?
I've seen them. I've seen them work on highway. That's horizontal highway work is not work that we currently do, but I've seen it and it does work. It's very controlled, very repetitive, really perfectly situated for that type of for a robot to do that type of work. On the on a plant work, we have not seen it. I mean, unless you call a drone a robot, which really it is. It's an autonomous robot that flies around. Seeing some stuff Hilti has, those type of things for like the automated drill, drilling holes, whether it's core hole or it's a anchor bolts. That does have a place. That I could clearly see on a place, and it would require knowledge ahead of time that you're using that technology so that you get it in the right spot on the schedule, because it needs a clear room to roam to do its work, and traditionally that may not happen. We would have other things in the way because normally we're going up there with a ladder. So we're not seeing a lot on robots yet, just because of the nature of the sites.
And Jeff, from a design, sorry to cut you off, but Jeff, from a design perspective, are you seeing some contractors come and say, hey, we want to use this particular robotic approach or gantry system for a roadway, therefore we need these additional engineering considerations to support the temporary works, or are owners coming to you saying, design this bridge so that we can replace it in 2 hours 20 years from now? Like, are these types of considerations starting to come into the design?
Those are definitely bold steps there for sure in terms of crossing there. As I mentioned, the whole concept of design for advanced manufacturing and fabrication has designers thinking about those downstream and building relationship in the feedback loop from supply chain and timing and stuff like that. And so I think that's definitely happening. And in terms of just overall kind of intelligence on the design side and AI, and I don't know if we should touch on that for sure, the robotic sides of that. Certainly that early analysis, that scenario planning, we have more capabilities to analyze more using those kind of capabilities. So instead of analyzing 3, we can analyze 50 now and have those downstream opportunities. But as well as kind of these public projects get bigger and bigger, and also as they roll up into programs now, which is kind of the big thing, the amount of kind of information that's flowing now is becoming really hard to handle. And we're seeing in this market and other markets, programs that have started 1 year, 2 year in starting to break down because of the complexity. So there's a lot of intelligence kind of capability in consuming kind of information,
right,
directing and managing, and getting into predictive and kind of around scheduling and cost, those kind of elements. But I think it kind of comes down to data. And if you're doing kind of data from that very beginning stage and making it interoperable and kind of being able to kind of fit into those equations, it's going to create those intelligence opportunities, and connecting into construction. If it's raw, if it's interoperable, it can be kind of plugged into anywhere.
Yeah.
So from a design perspective, kind of delivering rawness so that it can be adopted into different use cases.
So AI will have a huge impact, I think, going forward. We were just on the edge of it.
Yeah, I think AI, I was thinking about through this conference, is if you look at all the steps it takes to bring a project to construction, and this really wouldn't matter if it's infrastructure or commercial or even residential. Then you start out with an owner, come up with an idea. That owner has a lot of employees to come up with that idea. They give an architect, engineer, their whole team coming up with the design. Eventually, that design gets estimated by a contractor, pricing's done. You finally get the resources in place to actually get guys in the field to actually start building the work, and you get your tradesmen building the work. Where AI is most adaptable is not the tradesmen in the field. It's everything that comes before you get in the field. And the reality, in 5 years, the biggest change isn't going to be to what's happening in the field. It's going to be what's happening from the owners and the designers and in the upfront contractors management side feels to that being affected by AI. It's those jobs, including our jobs in this room, are far more adaptable to AI enhancing, or in some cases maybe replacing younger folks coming into these roles in the future.
Yeah, and I think the risk too is that as we use AI, we're just going to produce more documentation and more red tape, because it's so much faster to produce this stuff, and it's maybe not needed. Like the best instructions are the most simple to understand instructions, and therefore the least amount of red tape and documentation, right? And if we make it easy to produce documentation faster, better, whatever, it also comes with the complexity of just like being overwhelming. I designed my own house, and I have like 100 sheets, and it's too much.
Yeah.
I wanted to just make sure we give the opportunity here for people to ask questions. If you do want to ask questions, please just raise your hand, shout it out. It's fine. So yeah, looking 10 years out, maybe let's start over here with IO. When you think about there's a number of initiatives you're just at the very beginning of the digital twin initiative. And I think you made a commitment earlier to digitize all the underground utilities in the city of Toronto. So looking.
You're going to get me in trouble.
So looking 10 years out, where do you want to be with these existing initiatives, and how do you think the industry is going to be operating, and what role will you do facilitate? I'm going to ask that of everybody. So.
Well, I would hope for all of our large infrastructure builds, whether it be hospitals, roadways, transit, there will be worked into our procurements. There will be budget to drive the use of technology to create digital twins, because it's not free, and that through that we can transform the way we design, we can build, and operate and maintain Ontario's assets.
Do you envision that there'll be more standardized? In IO's RFPs, there's often different dissimilar requirements. That's like one of the things.
I think driving standardization is something we could really play a key role in driving. Mm-hmm. And I think that's before even we get into technology. Like I think it was Dan that was mentioning how it's also about people and getting those. It's like, I think if we get our stakeholders, whether it be the utility companies that have their underground assets, whether it be the project consortium, we have to all be on the same page. Mm-hmm. And I think we can play a role in orchestrating that.
So 10 years out, IO is going to have really tight documentation with standards and deliver the initial information for the designers to start with.
If I have my way.
Something. So Jeff, 10 years out, how are you what's the same? What's radically different?
I'm going to have a technical one, but also kind of a human one. Definitely, I'd love to see in 10 years where technology has become an enabler of trust and relationships between owner, construction, and designer. So in 10 years, there's some kind of different level of collaboration, standardization, contributions to kind of continual process improvement, but as an industry, not in kind of our individual kind of silo. So, and I hope that technology is an enabler of that kind of that future.
Do you still have your job, or is AI replaced?
Well, actually, I wanted to kind of bring that up as well, is that, there's a labor shortage in different areas of industry, but there's new kind of job markets emerging in our industry, and it's the programming, it's the governance for these kind of technologies, and the creative kind of workflow design between entities. So I don't know if that's going to turn to another shortage, but it's definitely creating a unique kind of labor market and actually bringing in different kind of skill sets actually into into our industry. I've recently hired people from fintech, and not necessarily knowing industry standards, but translating a lot of their experience into kind of AEC environment in a sense.
SQI in Quebec.
I would say it will be a repeat, but I would say data-driven industry based on collaboration, communication, better trust across the project teams. And we didn't speak about, but we have to build and design and deliver better infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure. I think in 10 years that will be the things that we have in mind. And I hope at this time, every stakeholder will not be there to defend and protect their interests, but work in a common goal to have better infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure based on data sharing.
What do you, I mean, that's a good topic we didn't really cover too much, but are you, as a procurement agency, are you putting requirements on your suppliers to report on embodied carbon? Like California just released requirements around net zero.
Yeah.
Is that on the horizon 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think in 10 years we will have that. We just launched in SQI our strategy for sustainability, and there's some goals in there with that. Yeah.
Dana, you ready to do that? In addition to building, installing the concrete, and reporting.
Sure, we'll build anything.
Sustainability report. Yeah, so 10 years out, how is PCL building wastewater treatment plants?
I see.
Prefabricated?
Yes, I see on a very streamlined, much more streamlined version of the design and procurement side. It kind of hands what you said. You kept playing there, but I think that's going to be coming from. I think the design and the VDC components of that are going to be heavily influenced by AI. That's reality. So we got to learn how to manage that in the future and make that work. It's going to happen. I don't doubt that. Once you get in the field, I do see, as you said, modularization. I think the design of the facilities needs to adapt. We're starting to see hints of that coming on with designers, is design it to be built more like an industrial facility, which are, industrial facilities are, if you look at them, look at what PCL does up in the tar sands in Canada with modularization. They don't look all that pretty, but they're extremely efficient to build. And there's no reason a treatment plant can be built the same way. They really
Create more repeatability and
they
the
do.
opportunities for
And
others.
part of that's going to come from, has to come from standards, because right now every design engineer kind of has their own little cookie, one little cookie cutter that they make, and it's their little stamp that they put on plants, and there's really no standardization from plant to plant. They look similar, but they're not 100%. They're really kind of, each designer has their own.
And it
thumbprint on
just, sort of has to interrupt, but in a design build scenario, are you exploring retaining the design and engineering IP so that you own it, so that you can build it again and again?
That'd be a good question.
I mean,
That's
that would piss
not.
him off, but if
It
he's
would
just using AI
be-
design it anyways.
I don't know if I can answer it. Just
Oh, it's an interesting question for sure.
from a risk level, I don't know if PCL is ready to. We don't want to be designers. That's a risk we don't want to.
Yeah, you don't want that.
We don't want to take. So 10 years from now, will that change? I mean, there's never budged an inch in my 22 years with PCL. I don't know if it would budge enough to, in a meaningful way, in 10 years for us to do that, but it's a good question.
It's a forward, productization around all
Absolutely.
building construction. I think that's the forward trend, because we need to do things the same way over and over and over again just to improve.
Yeah.
Right. So manufacturing, that's what they do. They make the same car 1,000 times, and they perfect that process, and they tweak the car a little bit and keep the machine running. And construction is a clean sheet of paper every time. And
Yeah,
difficult.
we've gone close to that by having partnerships with designers, where we've done repeat similar projects, similar enough that we can really kind of stamp out the same plant, same design. I can see that method going forward and trying to really, taking our ideas to streamline a plant to make it easier, quicker to build and be able to prefabricate as much offsite, but still have that in their design that they're stamping and standing by.
So if I hear you all correctly, 10 years out, all designs done by AI, we have a perfect database and all work is 3D printed and completely automated. Is that something
I
somewhere?
think,
Close.
I think it'll surprise us. We might be there, honestly. We're moving quickly.
Any questions before we wrap up? Go ahead.
I know digital twin was brought up a couple of times in this conversation, and I'm curious about IO's and SQI's vision of what a digital twin is in the future, or what your expectations are for future projects.
I think the way we're framing it, I'll start because I'm on the digital twin team at IO, is building a series. It's not just like one digital twin. It's an ecosystem of different twins, whether it's for like the linear assets like underground utilities networks, but then it's also for like large like building assets. So we manage like the general real estate portfolio for the province and having digital twins of those to help at first probably help us with site service, plan for design hospitals, and then throughout construction do site servicing. But I think if the vision down the line would be, and it's not in 1 year, it's not in 2 years, but like in probably like 5 to 10 years, I would say like more smart buildings, like smart hospitals, smart office buildings on what we own. So
Like tied to IoT strategies.
exactly. But I don't think that's how we, like, in my opinion, that's not how we would be rolling it out. I think that's a big undertaking to start, and we want to start very iteratively to make sure that people understand the value that we're bringing.
So what does that mean in terms of like a deliverable from a general contractor? Like, what would your expectation be?
I think it changes probably the way we work together in terms of the general deliverable. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. It's like we're very much in the strategy phase of it, and we need to still, like, I think in the coming months, we'll hope if government agrees that they want to proceed with this, we'll be going out and talking to our partners and seeing what they think they can bring to the table too, and working with them. Sorry, bit vague, but
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
For Jeff and for Dan, how much are you seeing the adoption of geospatial technology, and specifically GIS to using location to integrate the various information sources you're collecting?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's a major contributor to more context from a design perspective. I mean, there's just so much going on with Esri kind of integrations into kind of our design build workflows. Again, it's all, GIS is a great kind of, more contextual information to some of the more technical kind of like deliverables that we're used to in a sense. So I think it's great to kind of have that integrated kind of into an environment. It's very clear in all projects, GIS is a component, there's no question. And I see that trending more and more. And we're even seeing, like, I mean, even within the Esri stack, like capabilities in digital twin and kind of more technical oriented kind of geospatial modeling. I don't want to say BIM yet, but definitely kind of like that overlap is getting closer. So it's not just a mapping tool, but it's actually like really providing valuable information as part of our flow.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's, our projects they take a large spot on the planet when we're looking at them. I mean, it's nice when I fly around. I fly around a lot. Any city I've worked in, I look at, I can always see the project I worked on because they're that big. It could be a square mile or bigger in size. So mapping tools are a essential part of it. Everything from, using our drones just to figure out what a real true topo is of that ground, getting real coordinates, being able to do our project planning and logistics at the beginning of a project. Those mapping tools are essential to do that, to be able to lay out a project and it carries the entire project really all the elements of the project really kind of stem from that, how the project's laid out, how traffic patterns happen through the project, where you stage people, where you stage material, how to find material once it's been staged. It's a key component of the project.
It's an interesting point there, but I'm a big kind of believer in storytelling on infrastructure delivery, and I love actually leveraging geospatial mapping and as kind of overarching kind of storyline and kind of, you know, there's different ways of kind of presenting geospatial information in a sense. So it really becomes a good storytelling too as well. It's a wrapper kind of around, and being able to kind of integrate real information into that story. I think it really kind of has an interesting value point for GIS. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? I don't know what time we were supposed to wrap up, but I feel like that was like an hour.
Yeah.
For fabrication of, let's say, spools and stuff, do you use any kind of robotics, welding, laser cutting kind of tools?
On site, no. Like I said, we try to minimize any of that type of work on site to start with. At the where these are fabricated, depends on the type of pipe. If it's like stainless steel or maybe a little bit more exotic pipe that we're doing, yes, they are using all of the above that you mentioned for cutting it. If it's a little more blue collar ductile iron pipe, if you've ever been to a ductile iron pipe foundry, they're pretty crude. And they literally are taking scrap steel and don't even clean it. They just melt it, turn it into pipe. So there is a much more manual process. There is some automation in it, but it's still pretty manual on the ductile. I would see that changing, I would think. And that's really kind of at the manufacturer's realm. And we can't really dictate what they do, but they're facing the same challenges. They got an older workforce, and it's pretty hard to convince people to go in and work in a ductile iron pipe foundry, cutting and grinding pipe all day long. So I would think naturally they're going to go to be robotizing that.
Okay, I think we should wrap up because we're starting to lose people. We got to be, but thank you so much to the panel. Appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.